Hello everyone, and a warm welcome to today's webinar, From Data to Action, Strengthening Site-Based Conservation Along the East Atlantic Flyway. I'm Rebecca Stewart, and I'll be your guide today through our speakers. And this is the first in a series of 3 webinars this year, hosted by our project, funded by the International Climate Initiative of the German government, for a climate resilient East Atlantic Flyway. So a few quick housekeeping notes. So we are recording this session, so keep your cameras off, your name not visible if you don't want to be recorded. I don't think you will be recorded. Interpretation is available in English and French. So use the small globe, follow the instructions on the screen to get your chosen language. And finally, I've got an email address at the bottom there, wsfi@waddenseasecretariat.org, if anyone has any questions, because we won't have so much time for question and answers. The chat is turned off, but you are very welcome to post questions in the question and answer box. Okay. And I think as we're approaching 3 minutes past 4, I will turn to our first speaker of the day, and that's Mark van Rumen from SOFON, the Dutch Centre for Field Ornithology. And Mark is going to share his screen and will talk to us today about the key findings from the 2023 East Atlantic Flyway monitoring assessment and the tools also used under the EU-funded TSI project.
You have to finish your sharing, Rebecca.
I will stop sharing and you can take it away.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark van Rome. I am the coordinator of the monitoring project under the umbrella of the Wetlands Flyway Initiative. It's a project we organize together with Wetlands International and BirdLife International. And I will show something about the results we achieve through this monitoring and how it helps in adaptive management of sites. It will be a combination of showing what we do with the monitoring and also about the project in which we investigated possibilities of new innovations. Very generally, we have to realize that we are not only going to count birds or to monitor environmental circumstances because we like it, but that is really something which will help in the whole adaptive management circle. Monitoring will signal problems. You can assess the monitoring results in terms of okay, where are certain priorities needed, or the other way around, to evaluate actions and management taken in sites. It will lead to continuation of management actions, and well, this is really part of the adaptive management circle in which monitoring, research, and then the assessment goes to management actions around and around. So why flyway monitoring? There is a lot of monitoring going on already on sites and nationally, and why are we also focusing on flyway monitoring? Well, I think already flyway monitoring is not something new, but it combines what are countries and sites doing at sites and bring it together under an international umbrella. Under this umbrella, we can use this kind of flyway results for all sorts of global biodiversity priorities, in which we can see on global level which species are under threat or which countries are not having the right directions of threats, etc. But flyway results are also very needed on a national level again, because through flyway monitoring, we assess total population sizes. Total population sizes in water birds translate to 1% thresholds. 1% thresholds are very much D2, in which we select sites of international importance under Ramsar criteria, under Article 12, the Birds Directive of the European Union, ADA critical sites. So very much international population sizes are used on a national level when you select sites of importance. Secondly, when you have national trends or site trends, you can compare these site trends with these international flyway trends. That is very relevant because in times of climate change, in which global populations of water birds are changing their distribution, you can maybe detect increases or decreases at your site, but only against the background of the whole flyway development, you have a better interpretation. Maybe there is a decline in your site and you are very much shocked by it, but maybe your birds are in another country because they moved to the north. So only when you have the combination of national or site trends in combination with flyway trends, you can really judge if there are trends going on in which you should really invest in management, or when it is a combination of climate change and change, which is a problem in itself, but on a different level at which you can manage on site. Last reason to think about flyway monitoring is that when you think about migratory birds and water birds of tidal areas are all migratory birds, and they are just not the whole year in your site. So a true annual cycle approach to the protection and management of water birds is really looking where they are when they are not at your site, when they are in other sites, other countries, when they can have problems as well. And only when you tackle the combined problems at all these different sites, the different countries, you have a really good combined management of water birds, of migratory water birds. So our study site, so to say, is from the Arctic to Western Europe to the East Atlantic part of Africa. Water bird counts in January from Norway to South Africa. There is, luckily enough, a whole history of water bird data and water bird counts already. You see in blue dots the different sites participating. In the middle graph, you see that many sites are, of course, in Europe with a long tradition and a lot of sites, but luckily enough, also in West Africa and in Southern Africa, we have sites. And on the right graph, you see that also there we have trends from 1970, 1980, but several of the really important sites in West Africa and in South Africa are also counted already in smaller efforts and expedition work in the 70s and the 80s. So with this combination of data, we can calculate longer term trends from the 1980 onwards. But we really like to improve and make a combined effort to do it better and better. When the Watershed Flyway Initiative started, we decided on a sort of what we call an integrated population monitoring. So it's not only about abundance monitoring. I talk very much about January counts, but in principle, abundance monitoring is also thinking about breeding bird monitoring. Certain species are best monitored during January when certain very high Arctic populations are concentrated at sites in January where they can best be counted then, and when they are in their breeding sites are very dispersed, very hard to find. But the other way around, so the colony breeding birds are much concentrated during the breeding time. So abundance monitoring is mostly best done by a combination of January counts and counts at certain colonies for certain species. It's not only about the birds itself, but we really want to know also how they interact and what sort of environmental factors they meet at sites. So there is an environmental monitoring component in our monitoring, which we ask observers and site managers to fill in questionnaires. It's a work in progress. We can improve that sort of monitoring. We will come back on that later on. And the whole interaction between total numbers and the environmental factors they meet at sites comes together through productivity and survival. So the vital rate monitoring is something we have not developed that much yet, but there is a lot of knowledge in all sorts of site and species examples. So I think there are good possibilities to do more on that, because through productivity and survival are the real mechanisms through which environmental factors influence the bird numbers, and that is what we all together call our integrated population monitoring. We have yearly counts as much as possible, but resources are limited, time is limited, persons are limited. So to combine our efforts, once in each 3 years, we organize a total count, what we call, and we have already done 4 times. 2023 was our last one, and in January 2026 will be our next one. Our 2023 results are just published. And through such a count, 36 countries are participating. More than 13,000 observers are working then along the flyway. More than 7,000 sites are counted, and at 130 sites we collect environmental factors. I'll come back to that. So what does that yield, that sort of counting and monitoring? Very generally, we have 88 species/populations we really follow, for which we really calculate flyway trends and population sizes. On the long term, you see here the frequency distribution of how much are declining or increasing. So 1/3 is declining and 2/3 is stable or increasing. And a little bit worrying is that on the short term, so if you look to the trends in the last 10 years, a slightly higher percentage is decreasing. So there is a certain signal that a little bit more populations are in decline recently. And that's something, of course, we need to watch very carefully. And that is very much the nature of our signaling, of our monitoring. This complicated graph, in a way, shows on the left species which are in decline, and the larger the bar, the more it is in decline, and on the right are the species in increase. So again, the larger the blue bar, the more it is increasing. And this shows the combination for each population in which. So Dunlin, several Dunlin populations, the ones of the Baltic and of Britain are very much in decline. But on the other hand, flamingos, pelicans, cormorants are in the increase. And well, there is a lot of differences. So it's very difficult to generalize. In general, how is it going with the water birds along the flyway is a difficult question. It's a really combination of all sorts of patterns. The map shows the sites for which we have collected this environmental data. So that is data about what sort of pressures are there, what is there for human use. And also we have questions about what sort of conservation measures are taken. And on the bar chart, you see the frequency distribution across these 130 sites of how often certain pressures are mentioned. And on top is fishing at this coastal sites, but also encroachment of buildings, recreation, hunting, farming, etc., etc. So this gives a general idea and the high percentage of sites where human use is there and where local people are considering certain human uses as precious and threats for the other natural values which are there. A new thing we did in our latest report is that we also ask our questions. Okay, if you have these flyway trends, how can you use it on a site level? And this graph shows this a little bit. So on the map, you see the distribution of the different sites. The bigger the red dots, the more important are the numbers there. And in blue and in orange are two different flyway populations. And on the left, you see the slope of the trend. So everything on the right of the 0 dotted line is increasing populations on site level. And on the left of the dotted line are the decreasing site trends. So each dot, each triangle is one site. And how bigger the dot, the more important is the site. And the interesting thing here is that you can see, okay, there are certain sites which behave much more badly than the flyway trend. And other sites, the green ones, are behaving much better. So we have not done this yet, but this will be an interesting approach in the future. What is the common denominator of the red ones? Which sort of pressures are acting there, which creates maybe the decreases there? And the other way around, in the green ones, is there a certain management there which will really help? So this is for one population across the flyway, and in a way, you can pick out your site and see how that works. And this is done by my colleague Romke Kleefstra for the International Water Sea. And in this graph, you see the different populations using the International Water Sea. And first, we compared how the flyway trend, and the flyway trend is depicted as dots, with the watershed trend, and the watershed trend is the squares. And if it is green, then there are increases. But then the interesting thing is here is the differences between the squares and the dots per population. If the square is more to the right than the dot, then the watershed trend is doing better than the flyway trend. If it is the other way around, the square is on the left of the dots, then the watershed, the flyway trend is doing better. And this, again, you cannot see all the different species, but it gives a general idea how your site is behaving against the general development of flyway trends. And you can also combine these ones because, well, all these species, managers are maybe not knowing all these species, but if you combine them to functional groups, so fish-eating species, plant-eating species, species eating shellfish, species eating worms, species eating other invertebrates, you get a much more clear picture already. And in blue is the flyway trend, and in red is the watershed trend. And there is, in general, you see these differences, but here in the red circle, you see that there is a really rather interesting differences between the combined trends of worm-eating species in the watershed against worm-eating species in the flyway. The red ones, the watershed, the watershed worming-eating species are doing much better than the flyway one. And in the map, and the international watershed is the combination of the Netherlands, Germany, and Denmark. We have worked this out in a more spatial pattern. In green is places where worming-eating species are doing really good, and in red there is where they are doing worse. So from this first pattern that worm-eating species are doing quite well, if we zoom in the international watershed, that we see there is still quite some differences. And in the eastern part of the Netherlands, there is some really good doing. In Denmark, they are really doing, but in certain parts in Germany, it's the worming-eating species like Bartelt Godwit, like grey plover, like common sandpiper, they are not doing that well. So it is just an example for the watershed how flyway trends and side trends can be used in combination and signal certain patterns. And this can be done in fact for each side along the flyway. Now, this is the watershed, but each country can do in a way this kind of comparisons if you have also side trends. We published this in this flyway assessment report. It is available through the website of the Watershed Secretariat. So if you are more interested, I really like to see much more details, then I can encourage you to do this, to look at this report. So in general, this whole combination, Watershed Flyway Initiative, Wetlands International, BirdLife International, leads to a regular availability of flyway trends and updated population sizes, the assessment of human pressures at sites, and we have a good network along the flyway and contacts. But of course, we have gaps in coverage. Sometimes the assessment of pressures is a bit weak because it's very much dependent on what somebody thinks about it. It's not hard measured facts. And what is also a bit lacking, and that hampers us in really advising on what will be the best management, is that we sometimes lack the mechanisms behind the change. We know what is happening there. We have the signals, but we don't know, is it the reproduction or is it survival? Is it against, how is the connection to certain pressures? So we had a project on investigating possibilities for innovations in 2023 and 2024. We had a nice possibility under the EU reform, under the coordination of the Coastal and Marine Union, to work on certain for innovations. In 2023, we made a review report about all sorts of innovations possible. We had a workshop with all sorts of experts. We did desk studies on special cases. And in 2024, we discussed scenarios for possible implementation. I show some conclusions there. We had a nice workshop, a lot of people, very much engagement, a lot of interesting ideas came together. We made an enormous list of all sorts of possibilities, and we scored them against local impact, what sort of subject they did, how much they cost, etc., etc. You don't have to read this, but if we squeezed out of this total table our best 5 recommendations for improvements, then starting more with drones is
Hello, Mike. So, sorry, Mark, you have 5 minutes left.
Thank
just
you.
for timing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So drones is the one in which we really think it will be helped, maybe first on breeding birds, but maybe later on also on large groups of non-breeding birds. So drones is a good one. I mentioned the questionnaires about environmental monitoring. We think there is a whole good possibilities about taking satellite imagery of habitats, changes in habitats. So that will help us a lot in improving our assessment of changes in habitat and how this is influencing numbers of birds. Bit of complicated, but the whole measurement of reproduction and survival can best be done by coloring in birds and then re-steaming them and then measuring how much of them are still alive. And the other way around in measuring the amount of chicks with adults, all sorts of possibilities, and then use this in a combination in an integrated population model to really measure which of these factors is the most important, and that will really help us forward in pointing to what is the biggest problem in the life cycle of a migratory water bird. Tracking is, of course, the combination of counting at one side, EBF data about all species, about total numbers, in combination of very detailed local movements and how sites are used, how sites are connected to each other, the connectivity between sites. That is very much brought forward by measuring, by tracking individual birds. So that will really help us as well. We made a whole possibilities of different scenarios, more advanced one, low-hanging fruit, etc., etc. It's no need to go into details yet, but I think we made a nice combination of certain possibilities how we could go forward with that. This is my last slide. So we had many exciting innovations are available. They are needed and useful. However, innovations require substantial additional funding, also for capacity building among the countries, how to take it up. We need to explore ways to implement the scenarios needed. It will be at the moment keeping the current monitoring at track, and that needs investments as well. And seeing where new projects can help us in improvements and innovations. And of course, this new CREAF project is a nice possibility for this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. That's a fantastic overview, and we'll just move straight on. So if you stop sharing your screen, and I'll introduce and welcome our next speaker, Khadi Gueye from Wetlands International. And she will share some reflections from West Africa and more about the local challenges in site-based conservation and the uptake of monitoring in management. So Khadi, please share your screen, and the floor is yours.
Je me présente Khadi Gueye. Je travaille à Wetlands International Afrique, côte occidentale et le golfe de Guinée. Et je coordonne avec Marc et un collègue du siège, Tom, la coordination du comptage de janvier. Et là, je travaille en étroite collaboration avec Tom du siège de Wetlands pour le contrôle des données issues du dénombrement. Et merci beaucoup. Je m'en vais vous parler de la côte de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, qui est un espace exceptionnel pour les oiseaux d'eau, de par la présence de beaucoup de zones humides, que ce soit des zones humides côtières, des zones humides marines, mais aussi des zones humides qui sont composées d'eau douce. À cela s'ajoutent de nombreux réseaux de sites qui sont au niveau de cette côte occidentale, mais aussi la présence de zones de non-reproduction, c'est-à-dire les zones d'hivernage ou bien même les haltes de migration qui sont très nombreux dans cet espace. La présence aussi de beaucoup de zones de reproduction qui sont très importantes à travers certaines espèces d'Afrique de l'Ouest, mais aussi les nombreuses zones d'alimentation à travers les vasières côtières, les plaines inondables, mais aussi le fait qu'il y a beaucoup d'habitats qui sont utilisés comme des refuges. Je peux citer les mangroves, mais aussi les îles qui sont aussi utilisées comme des zones de refuge pour la plupart des espèces. Et pour ce suivi qui est très important, je l'ai dit, nous travaillons en étroite collaboration en partenariat avec Wetlands Flyway Initiative, BirdLife et Wetlands International. Et pour cela, il y a un certain outils qui ont été mis en place pour bien suivre ces oiseaux en Afrique de l'Ouest. Comme vous le voyez, il y a la stratégie pour le suivi des sites et des oiseaux le long des côtes de l'Afrique. Et ça fait partie des outils qui sont mis en place pour le suivi. Mais aussi, comme Marc l'a présenté dans le flyway, la voie de migration. Pour un bon suivi, nous avons jugé nécessaire de diviser ces sites qui sont d'une très grande superficie en des unités de comptage. Des unités qui sont très réduites et qui nous permettent de faire des collectes de données et qui pourront être utilisées avec les meilleures conditions. Et là, vous avez l'exemple du parc du Djaoling où on a 11 circuits qui sont des unités de comptage. Et là aussi, c'est avec l'utilisation des résultats du dénombrement de janvier qu'on est arrivé à avoir 11 circuits, parce qu'au début, on avait 7 circuits, mais il s'est trouvé qu'il y a certains circuits qui sont trop grands, mais aussi qui regorgent de beaucoup d'espèces d'oiseaux, ce qui a fait qu'on a jugé nécessaire encore de scinder ces circuits pour des besoins d'efficacité et d'efficience, mais aussi pour la fiabilité des données qui seront collectées. Et vous avez aussi l'exemple de l'archipel de Bidiagos avec les différentes unités de comptage que vous voyez dans l'image, juste pour des mesures d'une meilleure collecte d'informations. Toujours dans ce même sens, et je pense que je vais parler de ça un peu tard, sur les défis qui sont au niveau de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, ce qui nous a poussé à organiser des sessions de renforcement de capacité. Parce qu'il dit suivi dit qu'on a besoin d'une certaine connaissance. Et de ces connaissances, ça passe par le renforcement des capacités, d'où des sessions de renforcement de capacité qui sont à différents niveaux. Certains, c'est au niveau régional. Vous avez l'exemple devant vous d'une session de renforcement sur le suivi des espèces nicheurs, qui était ici à Betinji. Et il y a tout à fait à droite une autre session de formation régionale, toujours sur le suivi des espèces nicheurs, mais en utilisant le drone comme outil pour la collecte de ces informations. Et tout à fait en bas, vous avez un renforcement de capacité régionale sur l'utilisation des applications. Ça, c'était l'utilisation de OpsMap pour le suivi des oiseaux côtiers. Et comment cette application pourrait être mise en liaison avec la base de données de Wetlands International. Et toujours dans cette même lancée, il y a des sessions de renforcement de capacité, ce qu'on appelle la formation des formateurs. Et là, il y a la nécessité de mise en place des kits qui vont servir d'outils pour le renforcement de capacité, comme vous avez le kit de formation pour la voie de migration, mais aussi le kit de formation pour les oiseaux côtiers de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Et j'ai dit c'est à différents niveaux. Après le niveau régional, il y a le niveau national, et je dirais même le niveau site, en fonction des pays. Et là, on a en face de nous, vous avez une session de formation au niveau national en Guinée-Bissau voyez notre ami et collègue Hamilton en avant. Il y a aussi des sessions de formation dans le delta du Saloum avec et des participants sur le terrain. Et tout ça, c'est dans le but vraiment de renforcer la capacité des acteurs ouest-africains pour qu'ils parviennent à collecter des données d'une grande qualité. Et à cela s'ajoute évidemment la nécessité de mettre en place à leur disposition du matériel pour ce suivi. Et qui dit matériel dit guide d'identification. On a le fameux guide ouest-africain qui est en 3 langues, mais aussi du matériel comme le télescope, comme les jumelles, et même les ordinateurs pour permettre au coordinateur national d'avoir un outil qui leur permette de compiler les données qui seront collectées lors des comptages de janvier. Et Marc l'a dit tout à fait au début, au suivi des oiseaux s'ajoute le suivi des habitats. Et à cela, il y a une évolution parce qu'au début, c'était avec un formulaire standard que l'on collectait les informations environnementales. Mais maintenant, il y a le JotForm, qui est une application en ligne qui nous permet de renseigner les informations environnementales. Et comme j'ai l'habitude de le dire, c'est le même format que le formulaire environnemental et ça nous prend 30 à 45 minutes pour renseigner les informations et partager en même temps avec les acteurs au niveau international. Et à cela, je pense que je ne vais pas revenir sur ça. Le fait que l'ensemble de ces informations collectées sont compilées dans des rapports, comme Marc l'a déjà bien souligné, mais juste mettre l'accent sur le fait que les informations qui sont collectées lors des suivis font l'objet de traitements et d'analyses et ces résultats sont utilisés pour, par exemple, connaître le rôle et l'importance du site. On pourrait donner l'exemple du Djoud, qui est actuellement patrimoine de l'UNESCO, qui est aussi site Ramsar. Et ce sont les données de janvier qui permettent de voir s'ils répondent aux critères pour être inscrits en site Ramsar ou pas, de même que la mise en place d'actions de conservation. Si on a besoin de faire des aménagements, il faut tenir compte des espèces d'oiseaux, ne pas effectuer des aménagements qui vont contribuer à la perte ou même au déplacement de ces espèces parce que ce n'est pas adéquat. Si on a un site qui habituellement accueille des canards, des oiseaux nageurs, et si on a un site qui accueille habituellement des limicoles, on a besoin de faire une bonne gestion de la quantité de l'eau pour être sûr qu'on va maintenir notre potentiel aviaire et du site. Et ça, elle pourrait toujours donner l'exemple du Djoud avec l'ouverture et la fermeture des vannes, surtout en période d'hivernage. Et aussi la législation pour la protection de la nature. Il y a beaucoup de nos sites africains. Il y a Bidjagos qu'on est en train de vouloir inscrire en site en réserve de biosphère, patrimoine de l'UNESCO. Et beaucoup d'autres exemples. Je pourrais donner l'exemple du PNBA. Je me rappelle bien au moment de l'inscription de ce site en site Ramsar, j'étais souvent en contact avec Amadou Kidé pour demander les résultats du comptage de janvier et pour voir est-ce que ça répond à quels critères pour l'inscription de ce site en site Ramsar. Juste pour montrer l'importance du suivi de ces oiseaux, même pour inscrire ou bien mettre en valeur les sites ouest-africains et aussi comment ils pourront contribuer à l'échelle de la voie de migration. Parce que comme l'a expliqué Marc et même dans sa présentation, ces sites ouest africains sont inclus dans les sites de la voie de migration. Donc, c'est vraiment la nécessité de travailler en étroite collaboration pour l'obtention de ces résultats. Et là, ça nous permet de revenir sur l'état actuel de la capacité et même la capacité institutionnelle. Parce que comme vous le voyez, on a un soutien limité pour le suivi dans la plupart de nos pays ouest africains. Et aussi, le niveau généralement d'intégration dans les programmes, plans et politiques nationales. C'est dans des rares pays ouest africains que tu vois qu'il y a des lignes, par exemple, budgétaires qui sont dédiées à la conservation de la biodiversité de manière générale ou même du suivi de ces oiseaux. C'est l'état actuel. La capacité aussi de coordination. Parce que souvent, c'est avec beaucoup de défis et beaucoup de challenges. Souvent, ça ne fait pas partie des priorités des États. Et on a même l'impression qu'ils pensent que c'est des activités qui sont sur demande des ONG internationales. Et ce qui fait que s'il y a vraiment un budget des ressources financières limites qui sont mis à contribution pour ce comptage. Et des fois même, ça nous amène à poser la question, dans quelle mesure le suivi serait-il sans le soutien des organisations internationales ou bien la contribution de ces ONG? Juste pour montrer qu'il y a encore un grand travail qui reste. Et si on quitte la capacité institutionnelle, on vient à la capacité technique. Là, nous nous retrouvons dans une situation qu'il y a de quelques bons observateurs de terrain dans les parages. Et même, c'est un mais. Et aussi des capacités insuffisantes pour effectuer un suivi effectif dans certains pays. Cela s'ajoute des suivis qui sont souvent effectués par des équipes
Kadi, s'il
itinérantes
vous
et
plaît.
la capacité au niveau des sites
Kadi,
n'est pas
s'il vous plaît, il te reste 5 minutes.
au niveau souhaité. Et là même, rares sont ceux qui ont la capacité de maintenir leur capacité sur le terrain. Et il y a une faible attention portée à la surveillance du site et qui n'est clair et qui est mis en place pour un suivi. Ça, c'est vraiment des situations actuelles. Dans la plupart, c'est très difficile d'avoir des protocoles qui sont très bien préparés, clairs, qui nous permettent de collecter des informations. Et à cela s'ajoute le fait que dans la plupart des cas, les surveillances au-delà de janvier sont très limitées. Ce n'est pas dans tous les pays ou bien dans tous les sites qu'on a des surveillances qui sont organisées en dehors de janvier. Ce qui fait que c'est un peu difficile d'avoir une idée réelle sur la capacité totale du site. Et à cela nous permet d'aborder la question sur les défis. Et ces défis, le premier défi, on l'a abordé, on le remet, c'est qu'il y a un nombre limité d'observateurs, mais aussi de chercheurs et même de formateurs au niveau national et même au niveau de certains sites. Ça, c'est vraiment une situation réelle, mais aussi l'insuffisance du matériel optique d'observation. Souvent, si tu vois dans certains sites, même s'il y a un télescope, le télescope n'est pas de qualité, ça ne permet pas de faire des identifications, surtout pour les espèces similaires. Et la couverture stratégique des sites. La couverture, il y a peu sont les sites qui sont couverts dans la totalité. Des fois, c'est des difficultés liées à des moyens, des fois, c'est à des contraintes même du milieu. C'est peut-être des sites qui sont plus ou moins enclavés, mais aussi des plans de surveillance. Ces rares sont des sites ouest-africains dotés de plans de surveillance, ce qui fait que ça c'est vraiment un défi majeur. Et à cela, je pense que ça, c'est La forte rotation du personnel des aires protégées, et ce qui nous amène vers un besoin continu de renforcement de capacité, parce qu'il y a des rotations, surtout pour le cas spécifique du Sénégal, où les gestionnaires des aires protégées sont très mobiles. Et aussi, le renforcement des capacités de collecte et d'analyse des données issues collecter des données environnementales. C'est vrai qu'eux-mêmes, ils te le disent, nous collectons des informations environnementales, on renseigne le formulaire, mais il y a peu qui ont la capacité de traiter et analyser ces données afin de sortir des recommandations ou bien des conseils pour la conservation du site, voire même au niveau pays. Et pour terminer, en guise de conclusion, ça nous permet de dire que je pense qu'il est opportun de poursuivre et de renforcer, continuer le renforcement des capacités de suivi à différents niveaux, au niveau institutionnel, comme l'a montré la présentation, au niveau national, au niveau des sites, mais aussi renforcer le réseau d'institutions de recherche et d'universités le long de la voie de migration. Ça, je pense que c'est déjà ressorti dans ce projet CREAF, et je pense que d'ici la fin de ce projet, peut-être cette recommandation pourrait être prise en compte. Le renforcement aussi des capacités d'analyse et d'utilisation des données, ça revient, et l'amélioration de l'utilisation des drones et de l'intelligence artificielle, notamment pour le suivi des espèces reproductrices, comme on a beaucoup de sites de reproduction. Et cela s'ajoute la nécessité de renforcer les capacités d'utilisation de la télédétection pour la surveillance de l'habitat, comme l'on suggérait dans la présentation même. Et pour finir, encourager l'utilisation d'applications pour l'enregistrement du nombre d'oiseaux, mais veiller à ce que les formulaires soient également disponibles et utilisés. Et là, nous ne serons pas terminés sans remercier les coordinateurs nationaux et les observateurs sur les sites. Sans eux, on ne pourrait pas avoir de données et même faire le travail comme on le fait. La collaboration aussi, le partenariat entre BirdLife International, Wetlands International et Wetlands Flyway. Et nos bailleurs Mava, Webstour du Vala et les bailleurs au niveau de Germanie et de Danemark. Et sur ce, je vous remercie si vous avez des questions. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Khadi. That was brilliant to hear about the sites on the ground and some of the challenges that you face. Thank you so much. So our final speaker is my dear colleague, Christina Meiser from the Common Wood and Sea Secretariat. So she will help us connect all this information that we have just learned with the Global Biodiversity Framework, the SDGs, Ramsar and AWA. So Christina, when you're ready, I hope you can share your screen and take us through.
Thank you, Rebecca. Let me share my screen. I hope you can already see my screen and shortly in presentation mode. Does that look okay for you?
Very good. Looks good.
Thank you. So yeah, I just want to take the last 5 minutes to briefly talk about how can we use the monitoring, or how can we link it with other initiatives. And I think one element which we've already heard is that the monitoring of migratory birds, I mean, it is an integral part of a lot of the conservation and management efforts which we're taking. And they do not only benefit the birds, but they also benefit other biodiversity. They do benefit local communities. So there's a clear benefit to nature, but also society. And still, flyway monitoring and the counting of birds is often seen as a bit of a standalone activity and potentially does not get as much attention as I believe, and I think most of you will believe that it does deserve. And that can lead to very fragmented efforts, so that where there are kind of like clear initiatives and motivated people, it increases the efforts. But in other regions, we still have kind of like quite a few data gaps, which we try to fill. And at the same time, we also all always struggle financially to kind of like find the funding we need to integrate these large scale monitoring efforts and to further improve them to really see what is driving population changes. And by clearly linking like flyway monitoring with some of the biodiversity and sustainability and climate goals that we're setting can help us to really raise awareness also with the governments for the benefits of flyway monitoring. It contributes to the sustainable management of the site, as Khadi and Mark have already mentioned. And it can potentially, hopefully, also help us to tap into some of the financial resources that are available for or under these multinational environmental agreements, because they officially come with some obligations of the countries who have signed them. And as has been pointed out, the migratory birds, they really rely on healthy wetlands, and these healthy wetlands, they have kind of like key resources that may be benthic species, that may be fish species. But what is in common is that if there's a healthy wetland that provides resources for the birds, it equally often provides resources for local communities living in the areas. And so if we kind of like start kind of like linking it also with the human interest and identifying really what is driving the changes in migratory bird populations and identify these environmental changes and see what can we do to improve the situation for the migratory birds, this will ultimately also affect the local communities. And so, I mean, just kind of like sum it out is really that the monitoring of water birds and habitats does improve on an understanding of the ecosystem functionality and thereby provides information for the sustainable management of these areas. And this is where we're kind of like coming then to the multinational environmental agreements and the benefit also for society. And we all know that obviously we have environmental agreements which are very directly linked with the migratory birds. Obviously, EWA is coordinating the conservation of migratory birds along the African-Eurasian flyways, and it's using the monitoring data to then guide population assessment and population management. And Ramsar is obviously very much focused on the wetlands we're talking about when we're talking about migratory water birds, and how to really protect them and use the resources of these wetlands in a sustainable manner. And thereby they also recognize these habitats which are critical for our birds. And so both of these agreements are very much aim to align the national actions with the international obligations. And in this sense, the flyway monitoring, which we've been discussing today, is strengthening wetland and migratory bird conservation. But there are other agreements which are obviously very much linked to migratory bird conservation, but there's also kind of like other elements they're focusing on which this monitoring can contribute to. I just have to make this task a little bit smaller in the corner. So obviously flyway monitoring provides data to not only understand population dynamics, but with the environmental monitoring schemes, which are kind of like slowly in development, they provide information on how the changes of the habitats and the environments contribute to population changes. And so they also help us to conserve habitats by kind of like showing us where the changes are and where we need to kind of like develop specific management measures. They help us integrating biodiversity into policies, because they can clearly show us this is a driver, what is causing population decline. And then we can have more leverage, obviously, to discuss with the governments on how can we improve policies and legislations to improve wetland conservations. There are the opportunities to really engage with local communities and kind of create this local ownerships by building capacities of the local communities, of local people, as Khadi has said. A lot more can and has to be done to ensure that these systems in many countries along the East Atlantic Flyway are really self-sufficient. And to also like strengthen really the local knowledge system, which then kind of obviously contributes to our global knowledge on the migratory birds. So really kind of like helping to drive this kind of like local approach and the bottom-up approach in flyway conservation, I think is key. And by that, we're really contributing also to the global biodiversity framework. And I think in terms of leveraging funding, I think the Sustainable Development Goals can be key because they obviously, I think a lot of governments where there's limited funding, then sustainable development has probably kind of like a higher priority than some management measures which are solely focused on nature or biodiversity. So specifically the monitoring we're doing is supporting conservation of marine coastal ecosystem because it helps us identify negative impacts. It can inform climate action. As Mark has said, the birds start kind of like using different sites, they're changing their migration routes. So they can even be seen as some kind of like primary warning system or indicator that something's changing. Obviously also very sensitive to the changes that are happening then at the local level. We can use the words to advance environmental education and also the monitoring because everybody who is able to kind of like count birds and identify birds with a little bit of education. And so slowly with kind of like very small steps can start contributing to protecting their environment. And there are like so many jobs in conservation and in flyway conservation that by having these kind of like first entry steps and really already building up environmental education at primary school level can benefit communities and nations long term. And obviously, I mean, what is better suited to fostering international partnerships if it's not flyway conservation, because just per definition, we are already closely connected and have to work together to really achieve something in biodiversity conservation. So I think my take-home message is really that we use the monitoring not only to understand kind of like what the birds are doing, but start linking it to some of the priorities that other sectors are setting, because that may help us to really leverage the funding we need to kind of like further advance it. And with that, I finish for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christina. I will just share my screen one more time to remind everyone if you do have questions. So we do not have time for a formal Q&A, but we do have an email address if you do want to follow up or engage a bit more. Today we've heard from Mark about the results of the East Atlantic Flyway report, from Hadi about site level challenges, and from Christina about how this is extremely important, not just to do the numbers work, but to also connect that with broader needs in the communities and in policy at policy level. So I really want to thank all the speakers today and everybody who has joined as a participant. Thank you so much. And again, here is the email address that you can use to ask any questions and follow up. And thank you finally to our interpreters for supporting us today as well, from Q Interpreter. Thank you very much. And with that, if there are no open questions, we can say goodbye. Thank you very much, everybody.